Okay, so hi everybody, and hello to people who are watching this later as well. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Dr. Tamara Black, and I teach in the writing program. Really happy to be partnering with the transfer student community and also our wonderful faculty guests who are here to present today's event. I hope this highly unusual semester is going well for you so far and that you're finding some time for self-care and for some socially distanced fun, and also, of course, focusing on your classes. And speaking of classes, it's hard to believe that we're already on the verge of enrolling in our courses for spring. And our objective today is to discuss two types of courses that you might consider for your spring enrollment. Specifically Writing 340 and also the Dornsife Toolkit. These courses can help you prepare for real-world critical thinking, problem solving, and presenting your professional self. And so in our first session, we're going to be chatting with three amazing Writing 340 professors, Dr. Chris Muniz, Dr. Leah Pate, and Dr. Dave Tompkins. And they're here to discuss USC's upper division writing requirement. And collectively, they've taught many, many different flavors of Writing 340. So we'll hear all about that. And then in our second session, we'll hear about the Dornsife Toolkit with Dr. Amanda Bloom and Dean Richard Legal. We welcome questions throughout. And so if you have a question, I'd say you're always welcome to unmute yourself. You're also welcome to add a question into the chat function. And do we want to shout out to our TSC leadership before we transition into the first session? I always want to make sure the student leaders get to say hello and take some credit for bringing us here today.
No, the credit here is all yours, Tamara, because Tamara and Amanda, especially in this session today, because they've been very helpful in organizing these events for us. So I don't know how to thank you enough.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And Tim?
Yeah, I mean, just like Francesca said, thank you so much for being here. It's really inspiring for, you know, all the people that are from other institutions. We are quite kind of lost at everything that's going on. So, you know, you guiding us is absolutely amazing, and thank you absolutely for your time, and thanks for helping us out.
Yay. Okay, so with that, we can turn to our first big question about Writing 340, and that's basically, what is 340 for? What kinds of skills and competencies do students practice in this course? And just so our folks who are watching a recording at home can I get screen sharing? I'm going to put a question up on the screen so people can find the questions that they want to look at.
Do you not have it now?
It says host disabled participant screen.
Oh, hold on. Let me see.
You have to enable multiple participants.
I can also put the question in the chat, but I think that might be it might be good for our guests, but less useful to people watching the video.
Can you share now?
I can. Yay. Awesome. Thank you. And we'll come back to the group so we can all see each other. But first, we're gonna be choosing the right 340 with our wonderful faculty guests. So yeah, here's the first question. What kinds of skills and competencies will students practice in this course?
Who wants to start?
I will. I'm Dr. Leah Pate, and I've taught both in the Humanities 340 and the Social Sciences 340, and then I've also served on the Upper Division Curriculum Committee, which kind of works with 340 for 5 years now. So I, like a few of the people here, I'm very invested in it. And for me, at the heart of 340 is a concept, what I would call rhetorical awareness, and that is an awareness of your rhetorical situation. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to get done? What is the best way to deal with that audience? And my assignments change. We look at, for instance, when you're working with, for instance, a professional audience that you might be writing for in your profession or in your discipline. Let's say you are a psychology major. What is the best way to write for an audience of psychologists? What is the best way to write for an audience of psychologists in Psychology Magazine versus the American Journal of Psychology? And so at the heart of everything that I do in my 340 is this understanding, is this recognition of your rhetorical situation and being very strategic about understanding who you're talking to, what you're going to trying to get done, and how you're going to adjust your voice, your style, the sorts of kinds of arguments you're going to make, how you're going to establish credibility, the sort of emotion you're going to invest, the sort of research methodologies, the citations you're going to use, learning to be very deliberate and strategic about that, because that's a skill set that when you are no longer at the university and when you have children in the future and you're arguing with them, you will be able to draw upon it in that way when you're trying to talk your way out of tickets, when you're applying for jobs. The ability to understand your audience and what you need to do in terms of the kind of argumentation you need to engage in, I think is a really important lifelong skill. So that underlies, no matter what flavor of 340, that underlies everything I do in 340.
Yeah, just to build off of that, I'm Dr. Chris Muniz also, and I've taught in arts and humanities, health sciences, and then right now natural sciences thematics for writing 340. So a whole range of different kind of approaches to what is what is our rhetorical approach, who's our audience going to be, right, kind of thing. So it's kept me on my toes too, but in a kind of fun way. But I think the way that I sort of envision it, sort of like Leah or Dr. Pate, is sort of thinking of, how do we talk to people within our own sort of field, right? Our discipline. How would I write a sort of research paper to be read by people within my field? How would I talk to sort of maybe like USC administrators, if I'm thinking about policy and I want to sort of shape, especially sort of health policy. And then I always sort of pivot towards, the public, right? So, and that can take, in my health sciences, when I sort of have them do a presentation as if they're imagining they're going to sort of do it to, they pick the sort of audience, but a group of USC freshmen, right, kind of thing. So how would they, again, they're sort of shaping their voice and their message through all these different places, but almost always sort of ending a semester with this turn towards the public. How would you write something for the Atlantic or the New York Times or something like that? How do you translate this sort of academic voice that we've just got finished training you in, right, and sort of, refining? And now we're going, okay, now undo all that. And now let's talk to people who are non-specialists in your field. And how do you sort of translate that? And for me, that's a really nice sort of fun kind of transition and thinking about how do I begin to sort of share this knowledge that I have with people outside of my field, with public, with things that I like to consume, right? Malcolm Gladwell or Jill Lepore, that kind of stuff, right? Atul Gawande.
Maybe I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So I'm Dr. Dave Tompkins. I'm not accustomed to referring to myself in that way. So, obviously I share a lot of the same priorities. I'll just try to build a little bit on what's already been established. I think that one of the things you get in 340, as Chris was saying, there's a real effort to sort of unlearn the certain disciplinary practices that we would have cultivated starting in writing 150 and then carrying forward. I always tell my students that if writing 150 is about learning to write for and in college, writing 340 is about learning to write for and in life. And so it's very much about sort of letting go of some of the assumptions that you might have about what an academic audience wants or what academic writing is supposed to be, and start thinking always about the future. It's always forward-looking, forward-looking, forward-looking. And to that end, we're always thinking about the different genres of writing that we're likely to encounter, both as readers and writers. We're thinking a lot more in 340 about audience, and to that end, about rhetoric going beyond just what we write, but also the way in which we present it, right? So even things like document design plays a role in what you learn in 340, because as I tell my students, when I open up an essay and I see 5 different fonts and 5 different sizes, and it looks like, you know, it's a bit scattered, that's a rhetorical message, right? That gesture is sending. And so we sort of work even on that kind of granular level on things like, you know, the appearance of how you present what you're writing. So I think, I guess to try to boil it down, it very much comes down to a focus on genre, and, you know, I would second the idea of rhetorical awareness, of really keying into audience, and finally, and then I'll shut up, thinking about writing fundamentally as a social endeavor, right? Any writing we're doing in an expository context, we're doing to be read. So we're always thinking about who's on the receiving end of this, right? Always writing for that other person, trying to anticipate what it is they need from us as writers.
You know, I just want to jump in really quickly because I realized this the other day in conversation that not everybody knows what rhetoric is. They hear the word tossed around. So if any of you is like, I hear them talking about rhetorical awareness. So rhetoric is, you could think of it as the use of language to persuade, or language that is used to persuade. So when we're kind of talking about rhetorical awareness, we're talking about being aware of the language that you are going to use to persuade. So rhetoric is the use of language to persuade. So we are so used to that being part of our lexicon that I think sometimes we forget that not everybody realizes. So just to kind of fill in that gap, if anybody had it.
And I would also build on what all my colleagues have said to kind of invite you to think about, if you're working on a 340 project that pertains to a particular audience or a particular genre, be aware that we're often teaching you skills for diagnosing a kind of writing and understanding how it works and understanding what goals it might fulfill, so that you can take that genre and kind of like bend it or blend it with another genre, or abandon it to a different genre that serves your purposes better. So I do a policy brief unit in my econ class, and it's not because I think students will necessarily spend their lives writing policy briefs. It's because I want you to be able to encounter a goal and think about, how do I meet it? How do I participate in this discourse community? What are the expectations? What does good writing look like? What does discourse look like in this space, so that you can write a rock star personal statement, so that you can create a great investor pitch, so that you can write a beautiful scholarly personal narrative. Whatever your goals are, you can meet them. So these skills become transferable to whatever context you're approaching. Let's see, let me share the next question, which is, what are the differences among types of 340, and what advice would our faculty have for students who are trying to decide what to enroll in?
I'll jump in there, since I've done so many different versions. Visual and performing arts, econ, social sciences, health sciences, pre-law, arts and humanities. I've done all of those, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some. I mean, they all have certain things in common, but, you know, was it last semester, Tamara, or the semester before that we did our pizza roundtable?
It was last semester. It was last semester. It feels like another lifetime. I think it was right before we all left campus forever.
Right. So I bring this up because Tamara and I conducted this sort of interview roundtable with students who had relatively recently completed 340, and, you know, one of the questions we put to them was, how did you select this course? And a lot of them, we were perhaps surprised, I was surprised to discover, were in fact not looking for a writing 340 that aligned with their discipline, but rather introduced them to a relief from their discipline, gave them the opportunity to sort of move away from, and if only for a semester, to write about and think about something else. And that seemed to be very healthy for them. So, you know, I don't want to suggest that is uniformly what people should do, but I do think that if you're inclined and curious to seize on an opportunity to think and write about other things, that 340 would be a great opportunity to do that, while also giving you the skills you'll need to do well in your own field. The fundamentals.
I would say that if you're not an engineering person, I probably would not enroll in I do think the engineering, the business 340s are pretty targeted for people in those disciplines. So, I mean, unless you have this overwhelming side passion for engineering, because I know so many people do, that probably wouldn't be. But I do think that I know with the social sciences and the arts and humanities, there's a lot of room to play because a lot of students do end up picking because of scheduling things. So we often get students who, you know, as Dave said, who are picking because they want something different from their discipline or because it fit with their schedule. So you can't really go in and assume that if you're teaching in arts and humanities, you can't really assume like an in-depth history of, you know, in-depth background with aesthetic theory or anything like that. And we know that. And so there's really within the two big ones, the most common types that we have, which are the arts and humanities and social sciences, like there's so much room to explore your own interests. So those are the classes I think that if you have something that you've always been really interested in, whether it be, you know, DJ subculture or global warming or whatever, like you can make the class your own. And that's one of the really cool things about 340 is because we're much more interested, I think, it's much less topical than 150. It's much more about skill sets and ways of thinking. And as we've all kind of talked about being strategic and then applying it to things that you're interested in. So I think the two big ones really give you that, are very capacious and give you that opportunity to try and do that.
Yeah, I would just build off of that because I don't think I've ever had a class that's just all, you know, everyone's from the same discipline. It's like even natural sciences and health sciences, you have people who took it for, you know, because it fit in their schedule, they're student athletes, they're business majors, you know, now of course there are like the hardcore neuroscience people. And so the trick becomes how do I sort of allow space for the neuroscience people to sort of challenge themselves and someone who's a theater major to also sort of write about something scientific, right? But again, that flexibility that's sort of built into 340 and you kind of pursuing something that's interesting to you is theoretically built into every course, right? It depends on the professor, I'm sure. So, you know, like my colleagues were saying, you know, first sort of go, you know, don't be afraid of it. In other words, if natural science is sort of the only one that's sort of popping up that can fit, you can say almost everyone has I guess, a relationship to science and technology and these kind of things. There's going to be a way that you can make it work. Same thing with health sciences. We're all related. We all know about obesity and cancer and all these kind of things. There's ways in which things that you're interested in can be sort of worked into the kind of flow of the class.
And just to add one last thing, I also think that, again, I haven't taught the sciences, the health sciences or natural sciences, but with social sciences and arts and humanities, I do think most instructors kind of have like one or two papers that are more targeted at that discipline. And even then there's still room, but then the other papers tend to be a lot of freedom, like a research paper on basically whatever your discipline is or whatever your profession is. So even if you were in a social sciences class, like usually, like I have, my first paper is very social sciencey, even though there's still room to play. But then I think beyond that, most of the classes then kind of become what you're passionate about and you're interested in.
And I'd echo that. I think that's a pretty widespread practice in at least the Dornsife 340s, where professors almost always create a lot of space for students to choose their own topics.
Butterscotch chips.
That sounds delicious. So we want our students to be able to write about topics that they're interested in, issues that they want to explore. And I think increasingly we're also interested in students' preferred modes of self-expression. And this is something that I know everyone has to make a lot of headway on. We have a lot of work to do, but it's also something that I feel our department is taking very seriously. Our third question is, standard American English is not my first language or preferred mode of self-expression. How does Writing 340 support multilingual literacies, code meshing, and inclusive anti-racist practices in teaching and grading?
You know, one of the things, this is not exactly groundbreaking, but one of the things that I've tried to do in the context of workshopping, you know, once upon a time when I wasn't thinking about these things to the extent that I am now, I might, in a workshop, looking at rough drafts, have had students, among the things that they were doing, make some comments about, about grammar. Do you notice, grammatical problems? What are they? What kinds of solutions can you advise your group mate to adopt? And more recently, I've asked students instead to look at the language and make well, first of all, to value the ideas above everything else, but also to ask themselves, if there are things here that are unfamiliar to me at the sentence level, is there a good reason for it? Like, is that part of what's being expressed? There again, going back to this question of rhetoric, is there some sort of rhetorical value in these differences, or what for me I perceive as differences that I need to appreciate by sort of doing more work on my end as a reader, rather than asking the writer to do more work on his or her their end.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I was excited to sort of speak to this population, other than the fact that a lot of my students are transfer students who are some of my very best students, or students I've gotten close to over the years, is I actually taught at Cal State Dominguez Hills too, right? So I taught in the Chicano Studies department over there while I was getting my PhD, and so the student body over there is English is definitely English not being your first language is the standard, right, kind of thing. So thinking about multilingual literacies in the literature that we read, in the histories that we tell, and those kind of things, were standard there. And so kind of transitioning that into sort of my writing 340 practice, it's easier in a place like arts and humanities, right, where we sort of naturally can talk about race and ethnicity and identity in general. But I think even as I sort of transition into health sciences and natural sciences, is starting out, I love this, the idea of this question, this idea of preferred mode of self-expression, is kind of starting out and getting students comfortable with, and perhaps even reacquainted with their own kind of way of talking, right? A lot of times we think academic talk is something other than what we normally speak, and sort of reconnecting to your identity. Who am I? What is my relationship to this field? What's my relationship to seeking knowledge in general, as an intellectual, as a budding scholar? What are my hopes and dreams? I think just starting there sort of kind of it releases something in people that goes, oh, you know what? I can kind of own this and talk about this with some kind of authority in a way that is perhaps, what we imagine academic language to be is not always the case. And so that starts that conversation, I think, as we sort of move forward in the semester. And again, it's different for every thematic, but I think it's something that a lot of us are working on in general.
And that's sort of the beauty of 340 too, because in fact, it is not necessarily academic language at all, yeah. Right? To the extent that we're trying to train people to think about good writing not only being associated with the academy. Mm-hmm. It gives people that much more flexibility to sort of, I think, move past some of those assumptions about what academic writing is supposed to be, which may be, for some of us, debilitating. Yeah. To move past that completely and start thinking about, in fact, the freedoms that writing well outside the academy allow. Mm-hmm.
All right, wonderful. We have an audience question from Katerina. She says, do some Writing 340 courses also have public speaking or professional communication elements?
My understanding is there's an oral component built into every class, right? Or there's supposed to be, correct, right? So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Leah.
Go ahead, Leah. She's like, we'll air all the laundry.
I do not know. Well, oral component could be casually defined.
Yeah.
I think I do not do formal presentations in my class for the whole class. There's group stuff, and I have like a whole, that is not an unthought out position. But we do, I have my WP4 is entirely professional communication, writing professional letters. And then my third paper is an ethical analysis using classical ethics, but they write about something in their profession and they have to figure out what is the genre that people in their profession communicate in and what is the how do they do it. So it's kind of like learning about professional communication in whatever field it is that they're interested in. And so, and I think that all of the classes have a real emphasis on you learning about professional communication, at least with one of the papers, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when, going back to our earlier conversation about genre, right, that idea of being a professional plays into that, right? How do I talk to, do I at least know that, right? That's kind of the foundation. Can I talk to people within my field as a professional? Can I go get a job? Do I know how to sort of, what the rules and kind of unspoken rules of my field are in a way? And then we can start to like bend them, as Dave was sort of talking about. A lot of them, in terms of public speaking, when it is a presentation, usually it'll be like, based on a paper or research you've already sort of developed in that course. And it's like, okay, now can you transition that into a kind of presentation that you might give at a conference, kind of smaller version of a conference paper or a smaller version of a round table or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In my class too, the presentations are kind of modeled on that sort of idea, and it's nice too because it's sort of it's its own kind of translation, and also, or I suppose adaptation is maybe a better way of thinking about it, right? How do you take an argument that you've worked up in one particular using one particular kind of media, and translate it into something that works in a different kind of media, right? So applying images, applying audio, things that you might not have had the opportunity to do in the context of writing. So yeah, I think that there are plenty of opportunities to cultivate some of those sort of professional, sort of presentation oriented skills, even if it's not through strict kind of professional presentations. Yeah.
And it's not like being sort of tossed into the deep end of the pool either. By the time those of us who do presentations, we've typically been in class together for weeks and weeks. There's a lot of workshopping, there's a lot of discussion, people are comfortable. So in some ways it's not a hostile audience, it's a familiar audience, and often the presentations are more about sharing than they are about judgment. So I think it's if you're looking for a course that would kind of teach public speaking in a highly regimented way, I think 340s are generally not designed to deliver those kinds of skills, but we do try to give people opportunities to share and sort of speak in public in different ways with differing degrees of formality and preparation. And there are a lot of different opportunities throughout the class. It's not just like we build up to this one oral presentation that your grade rises and falls on.
Thank you so much. It was actually very encouraging because I'm an administration major, but I'm interested in art history. So I've been to seminars before where professors have literally just read their papers, and it's very intimidating as a student coming in with very little academics knowledge. So yeah, thank you for sharing more. It's good to know that this is an option in writing 340.
I also will just get a plug in for 340. You're saying you have professors that just read papers. I'm on the committee right now that's evaluating everybody's like kind of their promotion files. And I've worked a lot of places, and I would say this to all of you, you will not find a more committed, innovative, kind group of teachers than you will in the writing program anywhere. You are never going to go into a writing 340 class and have someone read off a PowerPoint at you all day long and just read to you and talk to you. Like the classes, I know I'm biased, but I promise you, like any 340 class you take in the writing program, you are going to encounter a wonderful human being who wants the best for you, who's going to do everything they can to help you learn, who's going to do cool stuff in class, and who's going to make coming to class a joy, even if you think they grade you really hard, which is always true. But so just the PowerPoint reading their paper, sitting reading lecture notes, that's not how our program rolls.
Sure. Yeah, I would second or third that. I don't know where we're at on that one yet. But again, the idea that I think we're all sort of committed to building community, right? So again, it's kind of student-centered philosophy that's sort of driving a lot of our teaching. And there's this commitment to kind of push the boundaries and continually experiment each semester and reinvent our classes, even ones we've taught before, to just kind of, again, what is the best sort of experience that I could give my students? I think almost all of my colleagues that I've interacted with are sort of on that same wavelength. And it's super sort of inspiring, and it pushes each other too to sort of continue to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then this is a question that a lot of our transfer students have asked and are interested in. This question of, I've done my lower division writing course at a different institution. What do I need to do to prepare for writing 340 at USC?
This may seem out of left field, but honestly, the number one thing I would recommend is, if you are unaccustomed to reaching out and making a connection with your writing professor and becoming a bit of a fixture in that person's office, I would work on training yourself to do that. Because so much of the instruction in the writing program really happens during the conferences that we do, which are these sort of one-to-one meetings that typically last about 20 minutes or so. And you know, we often do them for all 4 assignment cycles. And not only that, but, you know, we're constantly meeting with people during office hours or by appointment. I find that those one-to-one meetings, which are kind of constant, are as important, if not even sometimes slightly more important than what happens in the classroom. So open yourself up to that, to a willingness to reach out. And I promise you, in a way, to undermine or to underscore to underscore what Leah was saying, you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, I think it depends on how long your runway is to when you're going to actually take 340 also. But my biggest sort of recommendation to everybody is, just read and consume as much information about things you're passionate in all kinds of forms as much as you can, right? Whether that's books, and again, across, we're very interdisciplinary in these courses, as you can probably tell, and in the whole GE programs, and USC is sort of built on this kind of interdisciplinary model. So reading things from science that you're interested in, climate science, and then letting yourself go down these kind of rabbit holes where you just sort of read about something that's sort of super interesting to you, even though it doesn't have anything to do with your major, and then going and finding a podcast with that author and just kind of internalizing the way that these people speak and the language and the rhythms of long form, right? Preferably not just sort of Facebook posts, but like long form articles in the Atlantic and Science Magazine or whatever it is. These kind of things that feel like they might be sort of pleasure reading is actually probably the best way to internalize a lot of these kind of language, the kind of language skills that you're going to be applying in terms of what we talk about and think about in 340.
I would add, just in terms of what Chris was saying, if you're interested in long form, there's a website called longform.org, and it's like basically an aggregate site of the best long form journalism on the web that week. And then they also do throwbacks to like amazing, like, articles from like, Martin Luther King, a 3-part interview with him in Playboy in the 1960s. And like, that's where it's just amazing. So if you're interested in seeing some excellent long form journalism, it's a great place to expose yourself. One thing I would say too is something that I do think sometimes some students who transfer struggle with, especially if they've come, depending on the writing program they've come from, is they've sometimes been taught to write in like a 5-paragraph model in sort of a strict sort of kind of formulaic way. And that's not really, as you become a more advanced writer, that sort of structure is no longer sufficient for like what you're trying to do. And I think that sometimes students get to 340 and they're like, wait, this is how I was taught to write. You do a 5-paragraph essay. I don't understand. What do you mean? I don't understand it. And I would just say that if you feel that, to sort of culture shock, one, know that that's very normal. And that's very common. I had been taught the 5-paragraph essay all through college or high school. I had to number my thesis statements and underline my topic sentences. And when I got to college and they told me not to do that, it threw me. So if I'd been taught to do that in college and then come into upper division, I think it would have been even more disorienting. So if that is how you've been taught, there's nothing wrong with it. There's totally pedagogical sound reasons for having been taught that way. It's just as you do more advanced writing, it's less of a sufficient form. So if you feel overwhelmed, one, know that's very natural to feel overwhelmed. You're not doing anything wrong. And you just need to, as Dave was saying, like, communicate with your professor. And again, it really, because your professors will be aware that this is something that some people are coming in with, is like, oh, they've been trained in this one way. And so they need to know that so they can understand the kind of sort of obstacle you're coming up against, that you're really breaking into something new. So do be aware that, like, you may have been taught in very particular formulas or ways to write, that they're not wrong, but there's just new ways to do it. And I think that sometimes that can be a little overwhelming, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It doesn't mean something was wrong. It just means you're learning something new, and that can feel a little like, oh wow. But I've had so many students be like, I feel like I'm stupid, I've been doing it wrong all along, and that's not the case at all. So don't feel that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just quickly, just to quickly piggyback on that. Of course, I'm in total agreement with all that. The one thing I would add specifically to what Chris was saying is that in doing a lot of reading and seeking things out to read, identify some heroes. Writing is an art, and so many of us learn different art forms through imitation. So identify some heroes and analyze what they're doing. And not to say that you should seek to sort of just copy people, but it gives you an opportunity to really to really get into what the writers that speak, or who speak to you. How is it that they do that? What is it that they're doing? How do they put their sentences together? What kinds of words do they use? Do they use a lot of, like monosyllabic words, or do they use like a variety of different kinds of words? And those kinds of things, when you get really into an author or a handful of authors, can be super, super illuminating when it comes time to start doing a lot of writing on your own.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to turn our attention now away from Writing 340 and talk about the Dornsife Toolkit. If the student participants have questions, you can add them to the chat. You can reach out to us later. But let's learn about the Dornsife Toolkit. Welcome, Dr. Amanda Bloom and Dean Richard Flegel.
Hey everybody. Yes, I am Dr. Amanda Bloom, and I definitely relate to Dave's comment earlier about introducing yourself as doctor. I tend to forget, and then I get into these contexts, and then I think it doesn't sound so bad, right? But yeah, so I'm really just excited to be here today with Dean Richard Flegel to introduce to you all a series of new 2-unit courses called the Dornsife Toolkit. Okay, and in a little bit, I'm going to have Richard speak to the toolkit's origins and why he created it and how it's meant to fill a gap in a USC student's education. But first, I just want to introduce what these toolkit courses do and where we can find them. So the toolkit essentially is a new series introduced last spring of 2-unit practical skills courses meant to supplement a USC student's already world-class education and to help prepare them for the job market and maximize their success in graduate school and for graduate programs. As we all know, our students get so many tremendous, incredible professional opportunities after they graduate and they go off into the world. And these courses really are meant to just help support them in doing that. So the first question usually that comes up about the Dornsife Toolkit is, of course, what is it? But also, where do we find these courses? So if I can share, hopefully I can share my screen. Here we go. So the first thing I would like to go over. So one thing that always comes up at the beginning of the semester is a student will come up to me and say, I didn't know about the Dornsife Toolkit until a buddy of mine or my roommate told me about their experience in class. And so it can be a little bit difficult to find these courses. So I've shared my screen with you. If we go on the USC course schedule for fall 2020, if you click on Dawnside College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, you have to go down to multidisciplinary activities. Okay, so you bring up multidisciplinary activities, you click on, here we go, MDA 300, the Dornsife Toolkit. Okay, so as you can see, the Dornsife Toolkit teaches a range of courses with different for different skill sets. So we have everything from launching a startup to personal economics to managing the work-life balance, a blueprint for vitality. We have a couple writing program instructors represented here. We have Mandy Hobemeyer teaches a Dornsife Toolkit course on grant writing. I teach the Dornsife Toolkit course called Everyday Eloquence, Expressing Your Professional Self. So These, as you can see, these courses take place just once a week for a couple of hours. It's really easy to fit them into our busy senior year schedule. At the same time, these courses, even though it might seem as though they're designed specifically for students who are about to graduate, who are at least in their junior and senior year, they are open to everyone. So I realize the transfers in the room, you guys already are juniors and seniors, but if you have friends who are interested in taking these courses and they're sophomores or first year students, then absolutely, it's open to everyone. Right now, most of my students in Expressing Your Professional Self are juniors and seniors, but I do have 2 or 3 freshmen who are really just trying to figure out that professional persona, professional identity, and unpack what they want out of their futures. So it's okay for these courses welcome students experiencing a range of mindsets. Okay, either you're just trying to figure things out, or you already have been accepted to law school and you're just sort of gonna hang out for a little while before you graduate. A student of mine last semester enrolled in 3 of these courses, really to round out her USC education. And she said it was just the best thing that she could have done to finish out her college career. She took, I believe, well, she took my course, but she also took work-life balance and I think personal economics. So I encourage all of you at some point to go online, check out these courses, see what they have to offer, see which ones resonate with you, right? And tell your friends, okay? We're all still doing our best to get the word out about these courses. And because it can be a little difficult to find them in the schedule, then word of mouth, guys, okay? And so ultimately the toolkit is indebted to Dean Richard Flegel. This was his baby. When the call came down last year for ideas for these toolkit courses, Dean Richard's the one I met with, and he really talked me through how to begin developing my own course. And I could tell it really meant a lot to him. So Richard, do you want to just speak to the origins of the toolkit course and how the toolkit courses are meant to fill a gap in a USC student's education?
Sure. So Dawnside College is a liberal arts center of the university. And typically what happens is there are a lot of kids who love the liberal arts. They really enjoy it, but they worry about what it's going to mean for a professional career. Or maybe the families worry what it's going to mean for a professional career. I think Katerina said she was interested in art history. And people say, oh my God, what are you going to do with a degree in art history? We have been doing a lot of work for several years now, trying to answer that question. So not only to reassure Katerina, but also that somebody Katerina can tell her folks to say not to worry so much. She's going to be just fine. So I've invented a lot of programs that try to make clear the relationship between the disciplines, because underneath most of the professional disciplines, most of the professional schools are liberal arts disciplines. So underneath finance is economics, and underneath marketing is psychology, and underneath medicine is biology and chemistry. And you could go through almost any of the professional curriculum, and you realize that beneath that, what we have is a liberal arts curriculum. And if you look at the faculty teaching in the professional schools, you discover, lo and behold, most of those people are trained in liberal arts disciplines. But the relationship between the discipline and its application in the world is not always transparent to people. So we've made up majors such as NGOs and social change, which is based in sociology, but allows people who want to go into the nonprofit sector to think about a way to train themselves in the basic discipline in such a way that its application becomes transparent. Or I invented a program called narrative studies that allows people to major in basically following the story. So if they're interested in a literary career or in the entertainment industry, they can take courses in all the different languages, all the different literatures, as well as in cinema and in theater and so on, because it's the story, not the platform, that really is what's important there. Well, in addition to that, the thought was, let me create a series of courses that students could take at any time, in addition to their basic four-unit classes, that would speak to very particular skill sets. So for example, if you really want to get involved in the nonprofit world, well, a lot of kids on campus want to make a lot of money when they graduate, but they also want to make the world a better place. And in order to do that, oftentimes the nonprofit sector is a place to go where you can get a good paying job. At the same time, you're making this world a little bit better for other people as well. So how do we give students an advantage when they graduate? Well, for example, if you take a course in grant writing, There isn't an NGO on the face of the planet that isn't interested in somebody who can draw money into the organization. So grant writing is a great skill so that when you are applying for a position, and they have a lot of different applications, and here comes one who studied grant writing and in fact may have written a grant and may have gotten a grant. Well, you know that that application is going to jump to the top of the pile because they thought, gee, we could use some more grant money in our organization. And there are toolkit classes about startups, startup businesses. There are toolkit classes about starting up NGOs and nonprofits, all of which are taught by regular faculty here who have had opportunities to really apply that kind of knowledge in real world settings. So there are skill sets that I think are enormously useful. How to speak, how to present yourself, how to speak eloquently in everyday situations as well as in professional situations, but also, excuse me, skill sets that people have told us they wish they had. How to handle their personal economics. What does it mean to buy a house? How do you do that? All those sorts of things that become important as you kind of move into professional context, as you move into graduate school, things that you kind of wish someone had taught you before you have to do it yourself for the first time. And the idea is, since most people in undergraduate programs are taking 4 4-unit classes, and that's 16 units, but the flat rate tuition covers 18 units, you can always pick up a little 2-unit class in addition to your 4 4-unit classes and just learn something that has a kind of an immediate practical application. So what we started to do is just think about, well, what's out there and what would be useful and who wants to teach them. And sometimes with things, some people step forward because we asked them to. I wanted a class in personal economics. That was something I solicited. But some of the people came forward as people who were doing things that were just, they were interested in, and they proposed something else because I run other programs as well. And I thought, you know, that would be a perfect thing for the Dornsife Toolkit. So for example, Wendy Abrams, who taught a class for us last spring on social activism, in which she brought in a whole host of very successful social activists who've been involved in all sorts of, you know, the woman who runs social activism for Patagonia was one of her guests. Now, I just saw the other day that she was the person they interviewed. You know about this little tag that they put on one of their shorts? Did anybody hear about that? There was a little tag that Patagonia just stuck on the back of one of the little tag where it says, you know, how you can clean the garment. If you look on the back of one of the shorts, it said, you know, vote out the assholes. They just put it on every single tag of those shorts. And when somebody they didn't tell anybody about it, they just put it out there. And when someone discovered it and they went to Patagonia to ask them about it, she was the person in Patagonia that they interviewed, that Esquire magazine interviewed about their doing that. So it's a way to kind of connect with people who are successful in the larger world, doing the kinds of things that students are interested in doing after they graduate. It's a kind of a low stress environment because it's not for letter grade. You sign up and you learn things, you do things, but it's credit, no credit, won't affect your GPA. So you can try something that you feel a little bit less confident in, something you want to learn about, and fill out your CV in a way that kind of highlights some skills that employers or graduate schools would be particularly interested in. Most people don't care if you took a 4-unit class or a 2-unit class in a topic. They do care if you systematically studied something like grant writing. If you had to write a grant and perhaps you even succeeded in getting the money, well, that goes a long way. And so the idea is to create as many of those opportunities as we can. We're going to introduce a new one in the spring on human design, which is, I gather, something like a user experience, which is, again, you know, designing things from the point of view of the potential end user. And that'll be a 2-unit Dawnside class for the first time. There's a class on visualizing data. So how do you take the kind of information that's sometimes difficult for people to gather just in text and present it to them in a way that they get, oh, I see what you're trying to convince me, and it becomes memorable and so on. So those are the kinds of skills that we're trying to promote, with the idea that we like the fact that students want to graduate and make a lot of money and make the world a better place. And if we can help you do that, great. That's what it's for. So I would just say, check them out. There's a website, it may be a little easier to find than the MDA 300 class. Let's see, can I share this? Yeah, it looks like right here. So here's the website. And it's, as you can see, it's just dornsife.usc.edu/toolkit. It's not hard to find. And it will list for each semester all the classes that we're offering in that semester. So I don't know, let's see what we got here. Here we've got careers in healthcare and how to start a nonprofit, and everyday eloquence, which is Amanda's class, and grant writing and visualizing data and launching a startup and project pitch and work-life balance. That's this semester. And we've been growing it. So we ran it the first time. We got a good response from students. So we'll run it again. And my general view about it is, if there's somebody who has a passion for a skill like this that might be useful to students, I'm willing to give it a try. And let students vote with their feet. If it's something they're interested in studying, then we'll do it again. So I'm happy to take questions about it, but that's kind of the basic idea. And if you want to know more about anything in particular, I'm perfectly happy to talk to you about them.
Thank you, Richard. I think you sold me on the personal finance class, and I'd love to have these toolkit courses for professors too. I think no matter what age we are, no matter what stage we are in our life, there's always a question of, how do I do life?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Maggie Switek of economics has been taught it in the past. In the spring, it's going to be taught by Lodovico Pizzati, another member of our economics department. They're really smart economists. They do research, and they're teaching our regular courses in economics. And they're teaching this because they would like to, and they like working with students. And so I think it's a really good way for students to learn kind of the basics of personal finance and personal economics.
Absolutely, and also from the professor standpoint, what's really nice about working at USC is that, I mean, we teach the courses that we love teaching, writing 340 and 150, but we also have these other opportunities to teach things that right. and really see students we get to access more of a well-rounded perspective on a student's education.
So
somebody in the chat, yeah, sorry, Richard.
If you're using 16 units of the 18 units that you have available any given semester, first question is, why are you throwing them away?
Yes.
You can use them. Now you can take 4 units of physical activities if you want, but that's all. And these are just a way to kind of turn those units into something that may be profitable, useful now, work towards graduation. If you pick up 2 of these and you gain 4 units in the process, let's say you pick up 2 units now, 2 units next semester, and you find yourself in some semester where you kind of want to drop back to 12 units because you're taking a lot of lab courses or something like that, well, they'll help keep you on track to graduate on time. So there's a kind of just sheer numbers advantage to picking up a couple of extra units on the way. So the Tamara student who at the very end of her career just had a lot of units left and decided she was going to load up on them, well, sure. But that's not what we expect most students to do. We expect most students maybe will pick up 1 in a semester where they have those extra 2 units that they're just burning otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody in the chat asked about workload. Let's see, where was that? Oh, Francesco, you asked about workload. So I'm sure this must depend on the toolkit class, but most of the labor my students do, they do during class, right? During the 2 hours that we meet on Wednesdays. There might be a couple hours worth of reading, of reflecting, of drafting out things like cover letters on the weekend, but otherwise I'm not as interested in having students create an accumulation of work to show that they earn their 2 units, right? They're there with us in class, where we do a lot of in-class reflections, we do exhibitions, we do presentations. So again, most of the labor really is happening during those 2 hours of the week.
Well, I teach a 2-unit class in which I have students do a lot of work out of class. But the truth is, if it's a question of the nature of the work. If you're doing things that you care about and you're invested in, and you really feel that it's helping you, it turns out that work is pretty, rewarding. So I don't think, anybody in general, I haven't yet found somebody who found the extra 2-unit course to be a burden on them. Of course, if you're really taking a very impacted curriculum and you really can't do it, you can always drop it, but I haven't seen anybody doing that yet. So my guess is most people, if they choose a course that they're interested in, they choose to stick with it.
Absolutely. Were there any other questions from, I don't see anything else in the chat, but did anyone else want to jump in with a question for Richard and I?
I just wanted to say something in regards to the grade point that most of the time we take 16 units. So it's great to have to use those 2 extra units. There's just one thing when it comes to transfer students. Many of us, we need to take 80 units just to be on time. That has been my case in Sarava USC, and that's how I'm going to finish. So when we're going to publish on YouTube, we're going to make sure to post also the scholarships that USC offers if you're trying to take more than 18 units, which they are, they're available at USC. So students should take care of this if they look forward to adding this on top of their 18 units, because sometimes that is the case for us transfer students.
Good. Yeah. Good point.
Guys, I have to go teach right now at 5 o'clock, but thank you everyone. It's just really nice to see all you guys, right? To see you, Dave and Chris, and seeing Leah, and of course, everyone else. So, and thank you again, Richard, for joining us. I know Francesco got a kick out of having a dean here, so.
Yeah, I think thank you all of you guys to be here and talk to us a little bit about all that. It was great to learn about Writing 340 and the Dornsife initiative, because it's, school sometimes doesn't teach us what we're supposed to do in life, and I think that's exactly what the education system needs. Yeah, I think we're gonna close on that. I'm gonna stop the recording. Thank you so much, all of you, for your time, for your generosity, and I think that's why we all wanted to be a part of USC, because there's so many amazing people.
And I would just say that if anybody wants to follow up with me, I'm legal@usc.edu. I'm happy to receive your emails and respond to any questions that occur to you afterwards.
Yeah, do you mind putting your email in the chat just so we have that, and we can share that with people that watch the recording as well?
I'm sharing my email too.
Yeah, that'd be great. If anyone has questions, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll see you days. Tamara, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, team. See you next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye. All right, sweet.
Tim, I just wanted to say you did a really